Good morning. Back on the 30 reasons why following Jesus is the best decision I ever made. If you're checking this out and you're just kind of on the outside looking in and wondering, man, I don't know if I should, try Christianity. I don't know if I should try following Jesus. I don't know how that stacks up against everything else. Well, hopefully you're at least recognizing these videos as something from somebody who's just being real. Just being real. And today I want to talk about peace. It's reason number 16. And again, these are in no particular order. But I can tell when I talk about peace, and I talk about peace that is from God, like the day that I did that, August 3rd, 1989, my life was in tremendous turmoil. Tremendous turmoil. I'm not going to describe some of the things I was going through at that time, but I had no peace. Okay? I thought career-wise I was set. I honestly did. I thought, man, I'm going the right direction. I'm managing a bar. I'm doing well for myself. The money was decent, and the possibilities were endless, right? Like this is just step one out of many that I'm going to take. Who knows, right? But I can tell you in other areas of my life, I just did not have peace. I didn't have peace in my relationships. I didn't have peace in my habits. And there were a couple consequences to my living that I was facing at that time. They really kind of had me in some turmoil. And so on that day, when I turned my life over to Him, I had zero direction. And yet I had peace. I had zero idea of what was next. And yet I had peace because I was no longer in control. And when I was in control, man, I had a tendency to succeed in some ways, but to really make a mess of things in other ways. And the habits, like I said, I was creating for myself were not good ones, right? But that's not even the actual peace I want to talk about. The piece I want to talk about most right now is, like, since then, it's not that I never have time that I don't have peace. That's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, what's the opposite of peace? I would say conflict is the opposite of peace. So if you have turmoil in your life, you have things that you're worried about, things that you're anxious about, things that you're fearful for, you don't have peace, right? So do I ever face those things? Of course I do. Face them all the time. In fact, probably just about on a daily basis, like you do. But here's the difference. I have a means of coping with that brings me back to the peace. And it's found in Philippians 4, 6, and 7. It says this: don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all that He has done. Okay, that's verse 6. So, basically, don't worry. Instead, pray. Okay? Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Like, I can look back really easy and start listing the things He's done for me. And I do it in my mind all the time. He comes through for me all the time. All the time. Every time? No. Not every time. It's not a magic wand that I have. I just wave over my life and everything's great according to me. But I put my trust in Him, so I know that, excuse me, I know that if it goes really good, like the way that I hoped, that must be what He wants for me. And if it goes different than the way that I had hoped, I still trust that that's what He wants for me. And I trust that He loves me more than even I do. Think about it. He sent His own Son. He came down from heaven to be whipped and beaten and killed for me. He loves me an awful lot. Okay? So, back to verse 6. So, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray. So, we find ourselves worrying. We find ourselves fearful. We find ourselves in turmoil. What do? We pray. We tell God what we need and thank Him for all He has done. Then, it says, verse 7, then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. That's the kind of peace that I want to talk about. And I'm only going to take a second. It's that peace that is mind-blowing. What does that mean? Why is it mind-blowing? Why is it beyond our understanding? Because it comes into our life in the midst of real turmoil. Like you're in the midst of complete turmoil, and yet you have peace. Makes no sense. Makes no earthly sense whatsoever. Can I tell you a quick story? We were going through a really rough time. Had a ministry that we had started that went under, and with it, it took us under. We went bankrupt. Okay, this was back when we lived in Omaha, and one particular day, this was a situation where this was put to the test. Okay, and Jen was feeling this even harder than I was, and I was feeling it hard. Okay, but she was feeling it more because she was a bit out of control. Like we're taking calls from creditors, we're juggling different debts that we're trying to use this to pay this and this to pay that, and it was really rough. Okay, can't even describe how rough. But for Jen, she felt very insecure. She felt like our whole world was crashing in on us, which it kind of was. And she was afraid, what are we going to lose next? We're going to lose the house, we're going to lose the cars, what are we going to lose, you know? We're going to be able to eat. And I'm out there trying to make it all happen. I was working 3 jobs at the time and not making any headway. And I kept trying to rely on God and but I would continually rely on myself again and work harder and harder and harder. Well, one day, blew up. Like we just had a big fight. And I stood up from the table and I punched down on the table. Fractured my hand. Called a boxer's fracture. Just totally. I mean, I still have a knuckle here, and it's crooked. It goes like that. So I left the house. I was mad. Didn't know what to do. Knew it was broke, but I wasn't going to the hospital. So drove around a while, went to the church, went to my office. After I calmed down, started crying. I don't cry much, but I started crying. And I wasn't weeping, but I was just broken. I was broken. And I knew Jen was mad at me. She didn't want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to her either, to be honest. I mean, it was tough. It was a tough time. And I went to the hospital. Finally, I was in so much pain. I went to the hospital. They x-rayed it. They casted it. Couldn't do a lot for it. Didn't set it or anything like that. I just put it in a cast to protect it so it would heal at least crooked. Anyhow, on my way home that night, this verse came to mind. And we had small group at our house that night. Jen and I were in major conflict and broke my hand. And now I'm going to lead a small group at our house, and I'm the pastor. So I'm like, well, what do I do, Lord? What do I do? This verse came to mind. I said, okay, God, I'm worried. Worried about our life. I'm worried about my reputation. I'm worried about what people are going to think of me. I'm worried about how I'm going to handle this group tonight. I'm worried. So I told him what I need. And then he started bringing things to mind. Like, didn't I come through this situation? Or didn't I help you through this tough time? Do you remember when you guys were walking through that? Who was with you? And I started recalling all these things. And at that moment, a peace flooded over me. A peace. Like I'm going home to lead a small group with a cast on my hand because I just broke it in anger. And he said, here's what I want you to do. He said, I want you to shave your head tonight. I actually had hair then. I want you to shave your head tonight, and I want you to include the group in it. This will be healing, not just for you, but also for them. and it'll be healing for Jen. I want you to apologize to her in front of the whole group. And so I did. I came home. I was a little late. People were already there, and I walked in with a cast, and people were like, "Oh, what happened? What happened?" I walked in, I showed them the x-rays, and I said, well, I need to start with an apology to my wife. I apologized to Jen, and then I said, I guess we're going to have a life lesson tonight. I said I allowed anger to get the best of me. Instead of relying on God's peace, I let anger get the best of me. And in a commitment, I want to do something that will keep me from ever doing this again. And I want you guys to help. So I went and I got a razor, and I said I want you guys to each take a swipe till it's all gone. And so they did. They each took a swipe, bzz, 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 till pretty soon what you see is what you get. So if you hate it, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. And this is my sign that I need to not get angry anymore. But can I tell you, when God's peace came into that situation, you know what had changed? First of all, you know what had not changed? Our situation. Jen and I were still in conflict. The creditors were still calling. We still had a lot of bills to navigate. We still had a bankruptcy to face. We still had a small group to face. I was still working 3 jobs. But what had changed was I turned it over to God, and I thanked him for what he has done, and I allowed his peace to come into my life. And listen, when I get stressed, when I get anxious, when I get fearful, I stop and I do this verse, and I really, really do. Folks, I'm not kidding you. I do this. I don't just talk about it. I do it. And God's peace, which is beyond my understanding, floods my heart again. So if you are in need of peace, he is the Prince of Peace. Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Go to him. Go to him. Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7. Let that be your key. But without the Prince of Peace, you can't have true peace. So God bless you. Have an amazing day.